Perhaps we can begin. You've settled lived an eventful life, Mr. Carnegie, a far cry from your humble upbringings in Dunfermline.
Oh, Dunfermline, the ancient capital of Scotland. Do you know this old ballad? The king sits in Dunfermline town, drinking the blood-red wine. Oh, where will I get a steely skipper to sail this ship of mine? Then up there spak an elder nicht, sat at the king's right.
Not now, Andrew.
Okay, later maybe.
You were born in a small cottage, the son of a handloom weaver. Times were hard, especially when the power looms arrived.
Aye. Dunfermline was full of weavers, but as you say, everything changed when the machines arrived. My father couldn't make a living. He got depressed, but luckily my mother had more energy. She repaired folks' shoes and ran a wee grocer shop. It was in our front room. Can you believe that? In our front room. But we couldn't go on living like that. So we moved to America, to Pittsburgh.
Around this time you made your first investment. Your boss had suggested purchasing stock in a private courier firm. They were clients of the railroad company. Sounds a bit like insider trading.
It was legal in those days. My mother raised the money, and within 2 years I was making $5,000 annually.
A lot of money.
Money sure makes money. Then I got another tip. The railroad company was about to purchase sleeping cars, so my next investment was with the Woodruff Sleeping Car Company. That was also very profitable.
Especially if you're having railroad cars burnt, Mr. Carnegie. So once again you took advantage of insider knowledge. A different world from your experiences, Mrs. Carnegie. I expect your family didn't involve in stocks and bonds?
Oh, no. Our family's income came solely from my father's employment. He was too cautious to risk his money. He had a wife and family to support after all.
Aye, for my part, it was all about calculating risk and being bold. Most working men laboured long, hard hours for not much wages through graft and sweat. I discovered you didn't have to do that. Buy the right stock, sit back and reap the dividends. I was handsomely rewarded.
But you still work for the Pennsylvania Railroad Company?
Oh, you bet. They even made me superintendent of the Western Division. From Pittsburgh westwards, every train, every accident, every labour dispute was my responsibility. I was called 24 hours a day, and I was making $1,500 a year.
A lot of money.
A lot of money, yes. And round about this time, I thought I would grow a beard to give me an air of authority. Had it ever since.
What did you do in your leisure time?
Oh, I visited the local library. I had a thirst for knowledge, and I read voraciously. And I also used to spend time with my friends, socialising, with some drinking, some card playing perhaps, and singing a few songs. I learned a few songs. Would you like to hear one?
Of course.
Oh, good. Right. Well, I'll just indulge you. I dream of Jeannie with the light brown hair, born like a vapor on the summer air. I see her tripping where the wild streams play, happy as the daisies that dance on her way. Many are the wild
thought that was a Scottish song.
No. It was written by a young songwriter from Pittsburgh, Stephen Foster.
Now, returning to your work, working as a superintendent, did you not have labour disputes to deal with?
Oh, all the time. Management always took a firm line. There were no unions in the railroad industry.
I believe that your new financial status allowed you and your mother and your brother to move house.
Aye, yes. We moved away from the grime of Pittsburgh to a pleasant little town about 100 miles away, Altoona.
Did you not want to move away from the confines of your mother?
Andrew and his mother separated. They were glued to each other. I could tell you a few things about her, but I shall refrain.
You see, this is a touchy subject. Tell me, Mr. Carnegie, about your Civil War activities.
Oh, yes. Well, the railroad was essential for moving men and weapons. And so I organised transport of federal troops over a large area between Pittsburgh and Washington. Those were difficult times. The Confederates had been burning bridges and tearing down telegraph lines. But we pulled through.
I understand you were called to fight up in the Civil War.
Yes, that's true.
Mr. Carnegie, you paid $850 to an Irishman called John Linden to take your place.
Well, look, I've already told you I contributed to the war effort by transporting troops and armaments along the railroad. That was much more valuable than me picking up a rifle.
Andrew gave great service to the Unionist cause. The administration and President Lincoln were very appreciative of his efforts in the war. I'm proud of what he achieved in those difficult days.
How did you decide which company to invest in?
Oh, that's a very good question. I had 3 golden rules. Number 1, always invest in a company you have researched. Number 2, always invest in a company where demand is growing. And number 3, never invest as an individual, always with trusted associates, especially if they have the majority interest. Now I've given you my secrets, you can go away and make your own fortune.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Carnegie.
No bother.
Talking of fortunes, your next investment really set you on the road to riches.
Oil, liquid gold. Oh, I started up the Columbia Oil Company. That was a great investment. And I wanted to help a cousin in Dunfermline, so I shipped over barrels of oil so he could start up his own oil business.
My husband has always been a very generous man.
What did your cousin do with the oil?
I don't know.
Why did you not buy any railway stock?
Well, I had discovered that the railroad business was costly and too risky. But I realised I could make money if I could identify what the railroad needed.
Which was what?
Bridges. Or to be more precise, iron bridges. The ones they had back then were made out of wood. No goddamn good. They weren't strong, they would rot, and they were susceptible to fire.
Just like the railway carriages. I suppose the Pennsylvania Railroad Company awarded your company the contract.
Yes, they did. Aye. And senior staff even bought shares in the company.
That must be done in secret, for in fact they're awarding contracts to themselves.
Tell the man about the elephant.
Oh, yes, the elephant. Yeah, we had constructed a huge bridge across the Mississippi at St. Louis, the biggest bridge in the world. So I hired an elephant to cross the bridge to prove that it was strong enough. It was great publicity.
The elephant was a sensation. The people loved it, especially when it blew its trumpet right in the face of the mayor of St. Louis.
So it did.
I think the mayor liked that too much. Soon after that you went for a holiday in Dunfermline and you began to wonder about settling permanently in Scotland. It must have been strange going back home.
It was. Everything seemed wee. The buildings, the houses, the shops. Yes, it was. My aunt Charlotte said to me I should buy a shop in the high street. My relatives didn't realise how wealthy I'd become.
So you decided against living in Scotland?
I did. Life was too good in America. It gave me opportunities I couldn't get at home. I missed Scotland, of course. But I was rich enough. I could go back here any time I wanted.
I believe, Mrs. Carnegie, you had never visited Scotland before meeting your husband.
No, but I knew about Scotland. I had read about famous Scots like William Wallace and Walter Scott and, my hero, Bonnie Prince Charlie. I wanted to see Scotland and meet the people. And I had learned lovely songs like, Will Ye No Come Back Again?
Might we hear this now?
Oh, of course, if Andrew will help me, won't you, dear?
Oh, aye.
Bonnie Charlie's blue war, safely o'er the accent all right, Andrew?
Oh, yes, you're coming on, my dear.
Did you have any heroes, Mr. Carnegie?
Oh, yes, yes. My Uncle Dod thrilled me with stories of Scottish heroes when I was wee.
That be your Uncle George Lauder.
Aye, my Uncle Dod. Aye, I learned about William Wallace and Robert the Bruce, and my own hero, Robert Burns. I know quite a lot of Burns. I'll give you a bit now. When Chapman Billies leave this street and drouthy neighbours meet, his market days are wearing late and folk begin to tack the gate.
Mr. Carnegie, this is a very long poem.
I know. There's 20 verses. I know them all. When we sit boozing at the nappy and getting foo and happy.
Andrew, sit down. You'll forget the words and have to start all over again. Some other time, perhaps.
I'd opened up a plant in the outskirts of Pittsburgh. At that time, most steel was British made, but then the American government placed a tariff on it, so that was a lucky break for me. But I had noticed Lou, of course.
I want to ask you about your controversial labour relations. They seem contradictory to your background.
Not at all. No, I was brought up in humble circumstances in Dunfermline. I understood the working man. I was tough, but I was fair. When the price of steel went up, so did the wages of the skilled men. When the price dropped, their wages did too. The men understood this.
But you did have labour unrest.
I did, because of the goddamn unions. I had no problem with them at first, but then they became more unreasonable and objected to wage cuts. I firmly believed that if you gave the working man too much money, he would waste it on frivolities like gambling and drinking.
Strong views and quite controversial.
Yes.
I'd like to ask you, Mrs. Carnegie, about the relationship you had with your future husband.
Well, we started by going horse riding together in Central Park. We really enjoyed each other's company, but Andrew was away on business and vacation, so there were long periods when we didn't see each other. I really looked forward to him coming back. He did invite me to join a party of his friends on a trip to Britain, but my mother refused to let me go. I was so disappointed. He did write to me to tell me what a great time he was having in Britain, but that only made me feel worse.
Then, of course, there was the question of his own mother.
Absolutely. Andrew wouldn't even let her know how our relationship was developing. It was very frustrating feeling that I would always be second best to his mother.
Now, Miss Carnegie, you indicated there you were thinking of retiring from business, but you didn't in fact retire.
Well, I was semi-retired. Mother and I had moved to New York. I wanted to be at the heart of the financial world. So we stayed in a luxury hotel with its own telegraph office, so I was able to keep up with my businesses through regular telegrams.
And of course, with us both being in New York, it was much easier for us to see each other.
I believe this time you took up a new line of business, an international bond salesman. Apparently you were not adverse to exaggerating the viability of the companies you represented.
Well, I always believed in giving the most positive scenario for any product I was selling.
Yet you claimed in your autobiography that you never ever lied or cheated in business.
Sometimes facts can be interpreted in different ways.
Andrew did what he had to do to prosper when he was in business. It's not a world for the timid or the faint-hearted. And if he was ruthless, then he made up for it with his generosity later.
I see you mentioned steel, Mr. Carnegie. You'd renewed your association with the Pennsylvania Railroad Company and you'd supplied them with 2,000 steel railway lines. How did you organise this from New York?
Well, I appointed good men who kept me informed by telegram.
I must return to labour relations. In November 1876, your steel plant had its annual shutdown for maintenance. Men were laid off without pay, as was usual. After 5 weeks, the plant reopened, but the workers were forced to sign an agreement not to be a trade union member or else be barred for life. You thus destroyed the amalgamated trade union.
I did not believe in collective bargaining. Unions caused unrest with their unreasonable wage demands. If the wage costs had gone up, then I would have ended up laying off men. I didn't want unions in my workplace.
I have to ask you about the Homestead tragedy of 1892.
Oh, please, be gentle with him. My husband has felt badly about this for a very long time.
Shall I explain the circumstances?
Yes, please.
Homestead was one of the steel plants you had bought. It had a reputation for union militancy. Your company decided in a showdown with the trade unions. You tried to impose wage cuts and tried to impose a document barring the workers from union representations. The workers refused and the plant was shut, locking them out. The company refused to negotiate and hired the Pinkerton Detective Agency to recruit 300 strikebreakers from Chicago and New York. They were met by 5,000 townsfolk, and in a violent confrontation, 10 people were killed and hundreds more injured. The Pinkertons eventually surrendered, but as they were leaving the area, an angry crowd punched, kicked and spat on them. The National Guard were brought in to restore order. The strike lasted 143 days until the unions capitulated. You had broken the unions, Mr. Carnegie, but your reputation was sullied far and wide.
I was in Scotland when this happened. The manager was in charge. If I had been there, the outcome would have been different.
I believe sometimes your husband persuaded you to join him and sing for your guests. Will you sing for us now?
Oh, Andrew, why don't you sing that one I like about Bonnie Prince Charlie?
Oh yes, that one. Yes.
Thank you.
Time giving away my wealth, and I realised I couldn't give it all away in my own lifetime, so I set up various trusts run by people who would dispose of my money responsibly.
Talking of wealth, I believe March the 2nd, 1901 was a very momentous day in your life.
I sold Carnegie Steel for $400 million. They said it made me the richest man in the world. But I didn't care. I concentrated on giving it all away.
to talk about this giving all away, your philanthropy. The list here is enormous. You know, perhaps we can start with the libraries. I'm impressed to discover that you funded so many libraries in the United Kingdom, United States, and many parts of the globe.
Sometimes they call me the patron saint of libraries. 2,811 worldwide, for the record. The first one was in Dunfermline and then Pittsburgh. It all goes back to my childhood. To join the library, you had to pay a subscription, and poor folk like me couldn't afford that. So I vowed I would use my wealth and fortune to build libraries so that the working man could better himself through knowledge.
Now, you laid down strict conditions. You would pay for the construction of the building, but it would have to be a grand building. After that, the local council would be responsible for the upkeep.
We are very proud of all of those libraries, and the organs too.
The organs?
Oh yes, I donated over 7,000 organs all over the world
Why organs?
to lessen the pain of the sermon.
That's just Andrew's sense of humor. I used to love listening to the organ in my church in New York.
I'm truly staggered at the extent of your wealth giving. I mean, some of these figures here are incredible. $5 million for New York Public Library, which include all the branches in the city. The magnificent Carnegie Hall in New York. Pittsburgh got a Cultural Institute of Library, museums, music hall and educational establishments. $10 million for the Scottish universities. Generous financial aid for your hometown of Dunfermline. These all involve massive sums of money. Fascinating. Mr. Carnegie, can I move your story on to Carnegie the pacifist? For some time you've been a pacifist and you've called on countries to solve their disputes by arbitration and diplomacy rather than force. You condemned the United States for going to war with the Philippines, and you condemned Britain for its participation in the Boer War. You disapproved of America having colonies because you said eventually they'll want their independence and that would end up in war.
Yes, I did. I detest war.
After you sold your business, you became very actively involved campaigning for world peace. You established the Carnegie International Endowment for Peace. You called for compulsory arbitration treaties between countries. You advocated an international court of arbitration, all to avoid war. You were a frequent visitor to the White House as a peace ambassador, arguing that America should take the lead by persuading nations not to engage in war. Ex-US President Theodore Roosevelt was selected by you to be a peace messenger, and you paid for his peace talks with the German Kaiser. The public and the press often referred to you as the Apostle for Peace. You were delighted to be present at the opening of the Peace Palace in The Hague in 1913, which you had financed. While all this is very admirable, I put it to you that your business behaviour and your morality were strangely at odds. In the past you provided steel plating for American and Russian naval battleships, and you manufactured guns. Hardly the behaviour of a pacifist.
I was very uneasy about this, but my business associates said that if we didn't supply the US Navy, then another company would.
You're on record as saying we can make $1 million out of armour.
Look, that was all in the past. I made strenuous efforts to try and avoid the war in Europe. You mentioned Kaiser Wilhelm. I visited him in Berlin. He seemed eager to avoid war. And President Wilson in the US, he was keen on peace as well. I never thought that war would come.
The war did come in 1914.
Yes, it did. I was here at Skibo. I couldn't believe it. I was convinced that President Wilson would bring the warring countries together. And I was distressed that the Skibo workers were so eager to rush off to war.
We returned to New York. Andrew was so shocked he fell into a deep depression. It lasted all through the war years. Sometimes he would just sit in the garden and refuse to talk or write to anyone. His health deteriorated and he became wheelchair bound. Now that the war is over, he has recovered somewhat, but you can see he's not the man that he once was. I think he has answered enough questions for today, and he is getting tired.
I feel fine. How about a bit of burns? Wee sleekit cur and timorous beastie, oh what a panic's in thy breastie. Thou needna start a wassy hasty wi' bickering. How does it go? What's the rest of it?
It doesn't. It's time for a nap.
Okay. Where? We go this way?
Thank you.
Okay.